Disney's live-action remakes, including the recent box office smash Lilo and Stitch, clearly target two generations at once, with details that kids may overlook but nostalgic parents are sure to catch. In the original Lilo and Stitch, the world operates according to a sort of cartoon logic that you don't have to think too hard about. So, for example, it's not terribly difficult for Pleakley and Jumba to blend into Earthling society. They just put on human clothes, some wigs and headpieces, and maybe some makeup, and they're all set. But in the live-action version, that's just not going to cut it. So instead, they use holographic devices to reproduce the exact likenesses of two humans who look a lot like Zach Galifianakis and Billy Magnuson. Maybe this was a cost-cutting measure to reduce the amount of CGI, but it nevertheless fits with the movie's whole vibe. If the aim was to be set in the real world, then there's no way that Jumba and Pleakley could have gotten away with those slapdash disguises.
Actually, she's just ugly.
One of the animated Pleakley's defining characteristics is his preference for women's clothing, but that's all gone in the 2025 version. This change has sparked speculation about whether or not Disney believed that an alien in drag could have been too politically risky. That talk was intensified when director Dean Fleischer Kemp claimed on TikTok that he actually tried to feature Pleakley in drag.
Why is Pleakley not wearing a dress? And I just want to say, I tried.
To be clear, the original Pleakley isn't a drag queen or transgender for that matter. The whole joke is that he's just a unique alien who doesn't feel the need to conform to Earth's gendered clothing norms. But in light of Disney having recently scrapped a trans storyline from the Pixar series Win or Lose, it seems possible that something similar happened here. In the original movie, there's just enough space in Lilo's bedroom for a child's bed, a medium-sized rug, and some toys and small furniture, which makes sense for a working-class Hawaiian family. Live-action Lilo's room, however, is positively enormous. Even accounting for the different proportions of a physical set versus cell animation, it's still a bit much. Somehow, she has enough room for plenty of decorations, a bathroom, and a rug that's bigger than her bed and still doesn't even take up a third of the available floor space. This suggests one of two things. Either Lilo moved into her parents' bedroom after they died, or the set design team decided to be aspirational instead of realistic. The original Nani is temperamental and cranky, and she's also seriously reluctant to accept Stitch for most of the movie. She might get annoyed at her sister's antics, but she's never emotionally distant. Instead, their dynamic is constantly warm and loving, as Nani is deeply attuned to Lilo's vibrant inner life and genuinely cares about her interests. The live-action Nani, meanwhile, appears to be more burdened by the weight of her adult responsibilities, behaving more like a teenager who's in over her head. This results in her treating Lilo as a bit of an annoying burden. This makes for a more emotionally thorny version of Nani. She still loves her sister, but she's also somewhat understandably exhausted from having to put up with a volatile 6-year-old every day.
Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten.
The philosophy of Ohana is one that Lilo, Nani, and eventually Stitch practice with every fiber of their being. After all, it's what mellows Nani's heart and convinces her to let Lilo keep Stitch. The fight that Nani and Lilo have about Ohana and Stitch is maintained in the live-action version, but with one major difference. This time, Nani rolls her eyes and sighs in exasperation, and then tells her sister that all that stuff about Ohana sounds nice, but that it's not reality. Whereas the original offers a more idealistic take in which Nani sticks to Ohana as a bedrock principle that gives her the strength to make ends meet, the live-action Nani is a lot more skeptical about how far Ohana can actually apply to real life. The gist of Cobra Bubbles in the original Lilo and Stitch is that he defies expectations. His suited-up look and hyper-efficient demeanor aren't exactly what you typically expect of a social worker. By that same token, his genuine concern for Lilo and Nani underneath his tough exterior is just as surprising. Things are clarified a bit when it turns out that he's a former CIA agent who even once met the Grand Councilwoman decades earlier.
Ah, yes. You had hair then.
The live-action remake rejiggers Bubbles' characterization by immediately establishing him as an active CIA agent and then having him pose as the new superior of social worker Mrs. Keikoa to try to capture Stitch. This significantly alters the dynamic, as Bubbles is now not really invested in Lilo and Nani's well-being at first. However, he eventually does care about them after spending enough time with them. This change makes Bubbles a less reactive character and gives him an arc of his own, but one that arguably comes at the cost of a lovely surprise. David is a kind and supportive sweetie pie in both versions of Lilo and Stitch, but he doesn't play coy about his romantic intentions with Nani in the original. When we first see him at the luau, he's already asking her out. Although she gently rebuffs him, their romantic tension persists throughout the whole film, and a blossoming relationship is fully implied by the end. By contrast, there's much less romance, explicit or implied, in the new version, as this David is more of a bumbling platonic friend. He does awkwardly attempt to flirt with Nani in their first on-screen interaction, but she doesn't reciprocate him at all. Furthermore, although David is always around to help out, we barely ever see him and Nani interact. But even though there's not much romance on screen, clearly something was brewing, since they're kissing during the closing credits. The scene in which Stitch experiences surfing for the first time is significantly altered in the live-action version. In the original, he tags along with Lilo, Nani, and David a bit timidly, and only gradually opens up enough to be able to see the beauty in the ocean and enjoy himself. In the latest edition, he's still a bit scared at first, but otherwise excited from the get-go. And it all culminates in a really cute moment that doubles as a pop culture reference. As Nani and Lilo stand in the surfboard behind him, Stitch walks to the tip and stretches out his arms, just like Jack in Titanic.
I'm the king of the world!
When the first Lilo and Stitch came out in 2002, Titanic was still fresh in plenty of moviegoers' minds after lighting up the box office in 1997. So the reference certainly could have worked back then. But now, nearly 30 years after it came out, James Cameron's disaster epic is even more iconic, to the point that even Alien experiments can't resist showing off their fandom. And that's not the only time that the live-action Lilo and Stitch references classic cinema. The scene where Stitch grabs a water hose at the resort where Nani works also features him posing in a way that should strike a chord with plenty of movie buffs. Stitch stares down Lilo with a wry grin, his brows furrowed and feet slightly apart. Then the camera cuts to a close-up of his focused face, followed by a close-up of his hand as he prepares to fire the hose as if it were a gun. This is of course a reference to spaghetti westerns and their highly stylized standoffs, perhaps most famously seen in the 1966's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. In addition to being a cute bit of loopy cartoon logic that evokes the spirit of the original Kaiju's parody, this scene also amusingly nods to Stitch's status as a charismatic outlaw.
Bam, 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 bam!
The cartoon version of Dr. Jumba Jukiba is a mad scientist and criminal who's an antagonist for most of the runtime. Eventually, though, he shifts his priorities out of sheer loyalty to Stitch and transforms into a sympathetic, even heroic character. Plus, he never faces any consequences for his crimes against the galaxy. That sort of sympathetic antihero was a big swing for a family-friendly Disney movie. But it makes sense that the studio would mold him into a more traditional villain for the remake. A troublemaking blue furball is one thing, but a criminal who gets away with everything and joins the good guys with little more than a spontaneous change in attitude? Somehow the original Lilo and Stitch pulled that off in 2002, but Disney is playing it a little safer in 2025. In both versions of Lilo and Stitch, Stitch's guilt over wrecking things for Lilo and Nani eventually gets the better of him. Both movies' final acts find him isolating himself away from his new family because he believes that they're better off without him. There's a social subtext to that conflict in both versions. Stitch is, at worst, just behaving like a naughty pet. So it's not exactly fair that Nani's guardianship of Lilo should be threatened so decisively by his mostly harmless antics just because they make it harder for her to make a good first impression on her potential employers.
Sometimes things have to change. And maybe sometimes they're for the better.
But the live-action film really emphasizes how Stitch's sense of inadequacy is just him taking the blame for a situation he didn't create. It speaks volumes that his crisis of conscience begins at the hospital while watching Nani struggle to cover Lilo's treatment without health insurance. The movie even drives it home by removing the line in which David blames Stitch for Nani and Lilo's inability to make it work. In essence, the situation that Nani and Lilo find themselves in is designed to be fundamentally untenable. Stitch is just the catalyst for a crisis that was almost certainly going to happen eventually. The original Lilo and Stitch made a point of depicting Nani as an average working-class young woman whose life is not primarily defined by her career. Like hundreds of millions of people in the real world, every new job she takes is just a way to make ends meet, and her life isn't any less interesting or dignified for that. But the live-action version depicts her as a former child prodigy with big dreams to be a marine biologist that can't work with her obligations as her sister's caretaker. That's a big change, to say the least. The choice to make Nani a more ambitious and driven heroine does give her a layer that she didn't have in the original, but her decision to leave Hawaii and by extension Lilo to attend college in California fundamentally alters the original film's firm defense of Nani and Lilo as a strong, loving family unit, misunderstood by the state. In the live-action movie, Nani really isn't the best caretaker for Lilo because deep down, she doesn't want to be. If live-action Nani is burdened by living a life that isn't really the one that she wants, live-action Lilo actually appears to be living a much more put-together life than her animated counterpart, at least in terms of emotional maturity. That's not to say she's perfect, though. She is a 6-year-old orphan after all. Just like the animated Lilo, she's eccentric, constantly bullied, and desperate for a friend. But she also seems to be a lot happier and more mature.
He is your responsibility. Got it.
We promise.
Yeah.
The original Lilo had a much more abrasive personality, as she was frequently angry and still reeling from the grief over her parents' passing. By contrast, the live-action Lilo appears to be handling things impressively well. She doesn't have anger fits, her fights with Nani are a lot more measured and rational, and she seems pretty aware of what's going on around her and able to handle it all most of the time. Plus, she doesn't get angry at Stitch for jeopardizing her family's unity, and most notably, she even encourages Nani to leave Hawaii to pursue her dreams. It's not hard to imagine this version of Lilo thriving without her big sister around.